Right, well, speaking of things that are being rigged against us, the Conservative Party has decided to persecute their only Conservative MP. Now, there are a couple of backbenchers that are trying their best, but quite a few are cowards. Quite a few don't know how to articulate the issues of the day in the same way that Miriam Cates is capable of. And now she's under investigation. And much like with the current Trump investigations, it's bogus charge, but the process itself is the punishment. Because what happens here is no matter how innocent she very well likely is, the gag order placed on her around this particular issue means that she has to be very careful as to what policies that come out of government she criticizes. And so the Conservative Party are playing containment with their most effective interior critic and the threat to the sort of perma party that exists on the front benches. So I've gone to The Guardian for a summary of this because they are the biggest smear merchants in the UK you can imagine. But it also just seems that the Conservative Party are taking their talking points directly from The Guardian.
They genuinely have, haven't they? Like, they're trying to outflank the Labour Party and the left, but through the left-hand path, haven't they?
Yeah.
Read into that phrase what you will.
Well, I will be able to actually prove via anecdotes as well, firsthand, that the exact same accusations that the Guardian have levelled at Miriam Cates have been levelled by senior members of the Conservative Party. This is something that I myself have heard. I mean, kind of an expert in that with easy, aren't I? But anyway, point being, what they're doing to Cates, she's the MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge since 2019. She's being investigated by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog for actions causing significant damage to the reputation of the House as a whole or of its members generally. And this is a brief notice on the website.
That's a very strong thing to claim, isn't it? Because, of course, Claudia Webb threatened to acid attack someone, and she didn't necessarily have that accusation towards her, did she?
No.
As far as I'm aware, anyway.
But also, it's not really an accusation. Like, what has she done? It hasn't been published what she's done. It's been suggested. We'll get onto the suggestion of what she might be being investigated for later, but they haven't said exactly how she brought the party into disrepute. It's deliberately vague. Danny Kruger's tweeted this out, and he co-chairs the New Conservatives with her, and he's said, we as MPs and her voting constituents and the broader party members should know what she's being accused of, but we don't, and she's not allowed to talk about it. Very curious. So the inquiry falls under paragraph 17 of the updated 2019 Code of Conduct for MPs, which says members shall never undertake any action which would cause significant damage to the reputation and integrity of the House of Commons as a whole or of its members generally. The announcement doesn't give any further details. Investigations by the Commissioner, Daniel Greenberg, are kept confidential until the inquiry is concluded.
Hi folks, sorry to interrupt the video, but I just wanted to announce that we have a new line of merch in our merch store. The merch store was kind of empty for a while, and so I thought, right, okay, what do I actually want on shirts? And so I just went through some of the most epic and true things that I think that historical people have said, and John managed to make an amazing set of merch out of it. And we will have extra things coming in the store, such as posters for these to go on. Thanks for everything, folks. Now back to the video.
So the inquiry for an elected MP bringing Parliament into disrepute is conducted entirely behind closed doors until the verdict is delivered. So, what? How are our constituents meant to feel about that?
It's very Secret Service, isn't it? It's sort of, yes, we're interrogating someone, but the public's not allowed to see it.
Exactly. So they can.
It's almost like there's some sort of tomfoolery going on.
Well, they can accuse you of anything and put you through the show trial, and you can't protest in public. So, the process is the punishment. Those under investigation are barred from discussing the allegations. And then they give a summary of Cates in here. And this is why I think they're actually going after her, the Conservative Party and The Guardian. The former biology teacher is a strong advocate of policies to encourage women in the UK to have more children, echoing the ideas of European populists such as Hungary's Viktor Orban and Italy's Giorgia Meloni, and opposes allowing transgender people to self-identify. At a conference in May run by the US-based National Conservatism Group, it's also spearheaded by James Orr, who's a very English Cambridge academic, you'll be able to see us talking to soon. Kate said the UK's low birth rate was the most pressing policy of the generation, blaming it in part on, quote, a cultural Marxism that is systematically destroying our children's souls. The use of cultural Marxism is controversial because it is a term referring to a conspiracy theory, often associated with the far right and anti-Semitism. Do we remember that smear by any chance?
I do, because I covered it, yeah.
Yeah, you did. You did a segment on this particular article that came out at the time. Just their summary of what they're accusing Cates of here is insane. Cultural Marxism is a term of abuse in a speech on Monday by the Conservative MP Miriam Cates, and it's a more straightforward version of the two ideas to pin down. It has its origins in a conspiracy theory that Marxist scholars of the Frankfurt School in interwar Germany, many of whom were Jewish, devised a program of progressive politics intended to undermine Western democracies. It's not a conspiracy theory. You can just read Dialectic of the Enlightenment.
But it's also called cultural Marxism. They're highlighting the Marxist part. They're not highlighting the fact that the people at the Frankfurt School, most of them were Jewish. Otherwise, they would have called it something else.
Yeah, cultural Judaism or something. Like, okay.
Yeah, the Marxist part is the objectionable part, I imagine.
Yeah. But you may have noticed, I happen to know this author somewhat, Peter Walker. He used to come and basically just shit on UKIP every week. That was his job back when UKIP was around. And so, literally, his entire employment is just to make up stuff about the right wing in the UK and be like, look at them, they hate the Jews or they hate brown people.
No way, a journalist making up stuff about the right? That never happens.
I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong, but definitely The Guardian, I think it was him, made up the lie that UKIP had announced concentration camps for Muslims in our 2019 manifesto. And everyone came out with the manifesto in their hands and then heard it on the radio that we'd announced that. It was like, the hell are you talking about?
Did we miss that? What?
It wasn't in there. They just made it up. It was like, it's a hell of a thing to make up.
You know, you would think in a society that values journalistic integrity, that would be defamatory. But it seems that he and his ilk have suffered absolutely no consequences for that. And unfortunately, the people that are suffering consequences for saying the truth and their convictions are Miriam Cates and the very few politicians that are on our side. The reason I say that, and the reason I don't believe that this inquiry is particularly transparent, is because I went to an event near Westminster about a week or so ago now. And this is my tweet here. And the reason I've pulled it up is because I wanted it in writing. And an advisor to a senior member of government, very treacherous, I'll let you speculate as to who, said to me point blank, Miriam Cates is more National Socialist than National Conservative. This is a senior member of the Conservative Party's advisor, who obviously have pulling power over who in the party is going to get investigated, calling one of his colleagues a mid-century German. These people do not have your interests at heart, and any right-wing counter-movement within the party, they will smear as if it is one of their enemies.
It's Conservative Party factionalism. It's like they're fighting over the ashes of burnt Rome, aren't they?
Well, it's uniparty factionalism, because the same accusations levelled by The Guardian, which is the mouthpiece and the id of the Labour Party, at Miriam Cates, are being levelled by people within the Conservative Party. It's almost like they're committed to the same trajectory of travel. They just want to negotiate what colour the car is.
I think they realised that it worked against Jeremy Corbyn, and so they're going to use the same strategy to get people out of the Conservative Party, and particularly at this time when there's actually a conflict going on out that way. It might be even more inflammatory, I suppose.
But it's just totally nonsensical. Cates has done nothing of the sort. If you're really trying to stretch the cultural Marxism conspiracy theory means she's anti-Semitic thing, you've just lost the plot. Because nowhere in her speech did she say about the Jews. Absolutely nowhere. She's been on board with saying the Hamas protest should be cracked down on because of the threat to British Jews. She's one of the best mates of Suella Braverman, who's, I believe her husband is Jewish, and Braverman has been on this drumbeat when she was Home Secretary for the exact same reason. So this is just a smear because Cates embarrasses the fact that the Conservative Party say one thing about stopping the boats and lowering migration and building more houses and fixing the economy, and do completely the other because they want to gaslight the public into thinking they're actually doing what they're saying they're doing.
There's also the notion as well that Marx had a lot to say about culture, and so we just banned from talking about Marxism when applied to culture, because that sliding in through the back door is quite an insidious thing, isn't it? In that I should be careful using the word insidious.
Yeah, I know. I nearly got arrested at Conservative Party conference. Notice how the party didn't do anything about that either.
But yeah, if all of a sudden we can't talk about the influence of Marxism and Marxists on culture, and they're like, that's anti-Semitic. But you're like, hang on a minute, we're talking about their beliefs and their actions. We don't even know what their religious beliefs are. We're just talking about activists doing stuff. They're like, well, you can't. Well, then all political debate is shut down.
Well, it was also the religious beliefs of a man who said religion is the opiate of the masses. Okay, I mean, you must be smoking opium to believe this. But I wanted to highlight that because I think this is clearly politically motivated. And another reason I think this is politically motivated is because the speculated reason is ludicrous. So the Telegraph have reviewed this and they've complained about the lack of transparency. And in this, they bury well, they don't bury, but buried in this is one of the allegations to what it could possibly be about. It's suggested that all members currently under investigation, because there are a bunch of other MPs also investigated for different reasons that we don't know about, but Kate's is just the latest, went to an event during the COVID lockdown in 2020 that might have been construed as a breach of the rules, but the police have taken no action. Does this constitute significant damage to the reputation and integrity of the House? We should be told. Now, if that was the case, I mean, Rishi Sunak had to pay a fixed penalty notice for going to an event like this that was declared to be unlawful, and he's currently the Prime Minister parachuted in by the other members. So I would suggest there's an element of hypocrisy there. But it's not that just the police have taken no action, it's that it was already investigated, and the police said it didn't they decided it didn't meet the threshold for a further investigation. So if this really is the reason, it's a total nonsense reason. That's why I think it's a smokescreen to silence their most effective critic at a time leading up to the formation of their manifesto for an election they look to be about to lose. Because actually, Cates and the New Conservatives have been generating out policy reports that have been cutting against what Westminster, Whitehall, Number 10 wants to do in terms of migration and universities and the like.
The Conservatives are doing so much to alienate themselves from their core voter base that part of me thinks that it's a deliberate strategy at this point. Like, I almost believe that it's impossible to be this electorally incompetent, and they actually are trying to lose as resoundingly as possible.
Well, I would suggest that's probably the case when you put Michael Gove as Levelling Up Secretary after being a failed leadership candidate.
What does that even mean?
I hate that
He's in charge of
department
house building,
exists.
Callum.
So he's not building houses. So
Exactly, that's the point.
I've always
He's
wondered what hell
the
that
head of sitting there and getting a nice cushy paycheck.
Well, particularly from the 25% of party donors who are property developers who have the incentive to keep demand high, supply low, prices inflated, and mass migration coming in. So Michael Gove is like at the epicenter of all this, but I wouldn't suggest he's in any way related to any of this. This also might be another reason why she's being investigated. Do you remember the Rwanda vote that happened like last week? So the person who wrangled the sort of five families together, the rebel vote, were Cates and Kruger, and an emergency breakfast was called on the morning of the vote where bacon sandwiches and I hope a very strong coffee for the wake-up call were handed out.
Emergency bacon sandwiches.
I'm not joking. In Number 10. There was a breakfast to
I wish I could have that. Just say to Carl, I need an emergency bacon sandwich.
I don't even have a bloody mouse mat. You'd be lucky to get anything subsidized around this office. But anyway, point being, so Rishi Sunak hauled them all in and tried to plead with them to get them into line. And the five families refers to here, and this is something that Keir Starmer mocked for acting like the mafia, but it's I'll just read from this article from the Mirror. It's the Tory moderates are fighting to. Oh no, sorry. That's absolutely the wrong one. This was the coalition of the five families. So it was the One Nation Conservatives. It was the European Research Group. It was the New Conservatives, Common Sense Group, and the Northern Research Group, and the Conservative Growth Group. So all of these sort of coalescing critics like Liz Truss, Priti Patel, Mark Francois, and Cates and Kruger were saying, well, the Rwanda bill is not really going to do anything, is it? It's too weak, and we're not going to vote for it. There were 29 people that were going to vote against it. And after this breakfast, it resulted in 29 abstentions. And the reason this is prominent is because what it required was 29 rebel votes from the Conservatives, exactly, for the legislation to get shot down. Because, of course, all the Lib Dems and all the opposition parties voted against it. So had Cates and Kruger's rebellion gone as planned, the Rwanda legislation would have been shot down. The Stop the Boats part of Rishi's five plans would have looked totally untenable, and he probably would have had a leadership contest on his hands or an election. So they were scrambling over how much influence Cates has over the rebel backbenchers in the Tory party. And now, at a time where nearly she caused the defeat of the Prime Minister, she's been told to shut up. Very curious. Anyway, so she hasn't really shut up all that much, because she did a tweet the other day about something that she's been pushing on for a while, and that's gender guidance in schools. Now, this is separate to the sex education inquiry that she spearheaded, which we actually helped to contribute to, because we covered Swindon's guidance, Swindon Council, and that was forwarded to the Conservatives, and that's now gone in as a piece of evidence. Thanks very much for that. She's complained that this guidance that just got published the other day is actually painfully weak. So that's pretty interesting. We'll jump on that towards the end as well, because on the same day that she got censored, this tweet she put out: strong borders, low immigration, better skills training, common sense politics. These are the policies that won the last election for the Conservative Party. Characterizing these views as extreme tells you everything you need to know about the centre ground in Westminster. So she's obviously alluding to the fact that there is a group outside the five families, the types that Robert Jenrick was referring to when he said that the Rwanda plan is actually intended to be a dud, to cater to the people that don't want anything to be done about migration but want to be seen to do something about
I can
migration.
believe that.
And she's referring to that lot on the same day that she has been censored. Now, the article she's referring to is an article that got published on the same day in the Times. Tory moderates rally to challenge the extremists.
Extremists in the Conservative Party, oh yeah.
Well, I just wonder.
Extreme leftists.
I wonder what tactics they're using to silence their extremists. Published on the same day that Kate has a gag order placed on her to be under investigation. I'm sure just for a lockdown party. In this interesting group of people, so I'll read from the Times. Tory moderates are fighting to revive the party's centre after warning that the chances of it falling into the hands of extremists after the election are on a knife edge. More than 20 MPs, nearly half of them former ministers, so that shows you exactly who's been steering the ship, have formed a pact to push liberal policies next year and beyond. Figures from across the Conservative Party are already wondering what will happen after an election, due by January 2025, so it's probably going to be by the end of 2024, that the Tories are expected to lose. Some predict a lurch to the right, with those on that wing already pretty loud in a volatile landscape. One source among the moderates said, "We're acutely aware that the right of the Conservative Party has been pretty mobilised. Look at the new Conservatives." Names her. On the day that she gets censored. They've been everywhere, and it's given this perception that the party is far more right-wing than it is, when actually they make up quite a small minority. Well, the reason for the popularity of the new Conservatives among the base is because actually the base are quite right-wing, and you haven't been serving them for quite a time. That's why Kate has gone to NatCon, has been prominent at Conservative Party conference, has gone to ARC, and that's why the other Conservative Party members, like Gove, who gets bussed into gatekeep, isn't nearly as popular with the crowd. But this source said, the future of the party was at risk of being dictated to by extremists, adding, quote, "The message to the right is you've had your turn, now the grown-ups are in the room." Are you for real? A decade of mass migration that everyone's voted against. The right, the extremists, the mass migration skeptics have apparently been in charge all this time, and now it's time for them to step aside.
It's been Tony Blair in a mask the whole time.
It's not even a mask. Like, David Cameron wrote that piece last year that you and Cole covered that said, Blair made the Labour Party more diverse and more vitalistic, and the Tory Party was a bunch of old white men. So in the spirit of Blair, I decided to change that. And it's like, okay, David Cameron admits to being a Blairite. Tory right where? At any point? Now, you never guess who's backing this. I mean, it might just be a conspiracy theory on my part, again, but here we go. The new grouping is backed by the Bright Blue think tank, whose executive chairman, Ryan Shorthouse, said the centre-right in UK politics needs reviving. Centrist dads come again. Those signed up include Sir Robert Buckland, the former Justice Secretary, Damien Green, Theresa May's de facto deputy and the chairman of the One Nation Conservative Caucus, and the former ministers including Caroline Dinenage.
Ah, love that lady.
Yeah, do you remember who that was? The one who wrote the letters to TikTok, GB News and the like, saying that you should take down anyone who speaks out in support of Russell Brand and you should remove Russell Brand from Rumble.
Right, that hero of freedom.
Yeah, that person who's now saying the new Conservatives should be silenced. She's a real big fan of
free speech,
transparent procedures, isn't she?
These people are all about to lose their seats, though, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are leaving. I would be surprised if some of them aren't in main safe seats and trying
I'm just thinking what you're doing with your life. Like these human beings sat here being like, no, I need to save the Conservative Party from fun. So what? Are you're literally, none of you are going to be around in 12 months?
But it's not fun. They want to keep the continuity of policies to keep flooding the country with random Africans for the GDP.
I don't know, like anything useful.
Yeah.
Just I want to preserve what exactly for 12 months. That's it. That's the entirety of your output these days.
Well, someone looked me in the eye last week and said that Michael Gove is the most conservative party in the conservative person in the Conservative Party. And when I asked him what was he conserving, he couldn't answer.
But what was the point? Like, why wouldn't you go and buy a house, do something, build a cookie factory? Like, I'm just thinking as a human being.
Idea.
Like, if you were actually one of these human beings who had spent all your life wasting it, you become an MP, you're now 45, and then you're spending the next 12 months of your life infighting about whether or not you can continue to cripple this party that is going to lose. Like, just on a human level, I struggle to understand these people.
Because
It's like fighting over a burning house, isn't it? Sorry.
I was going to say, and this is why you brought up the Corbyn example earlier. Again, I'm no fan of Jeremy Corbyn, but Jeremy Corbyn represented a fundamental break from the status quo of the Labour Party from the Blair and Brown era. And Miriam Cates, in a similar way, and her cohort, represents a fundamental break from conservative business as usual, which is mass migration because the Treasury's Green Book says we need at least 200,000 inflow every year to keep the GDP ticking over because we've got the spreadsheet that says the birth rates are too low. This is why she's turned around and said, actually, we need housing reform and to up on our national birth rates. So she is representing an existential threat to the existing policy order in both parties. So that's why they need to character assassinate her in the exact same way. These people genuinely believe the country will collapse if they don't keep flooding it with migrants.
I
What do you do with
I
that?
do think that Corbyn was kicked out of the Labour Party under false pretenses. I don't actually think he's anti-Semitic.
I think genuine. I think he probably is. I mean, he did write a foreword to some book that had some really dodgy chapters in it.
He has some questionable views and he's delusional. I mean, he's a Marxist, right?
Yeah.
So, but I also think that was a pretext to get rid of him. It was just an excuse, a bludgeon to hit him over the head with,
Well, yeah.
because he was in the way of their agenda.
But in the way of the agenda, and he was also political poison because he lost in the election by a stonking majority.
That's true,
to
yeah.
Boris Johnson. But point being, they're using the same tactics to try and smear and marginalise critics of the Conservative Party within the Conservative Party.
Mm-hmm. But he stepped down after he lost the election. They kicked him out of the party after the whole scandal thing, right?
Yes.
So that's a lot further. But
Well,
sorry, do carry on.
That's all right. And just a couple more names. Damien Collins, Chloe Smith, John Penrose, Alan Cairns, and the Northern Research Group, John Stevenson. The group, called the Black Blue Community, also has supporters among the Lords and among thinkers on the right outside of Parliament. Dinage, the MP for Gosport, added, "It is vital we demonstrate the benefits of the centre ground." Caroline Dinage is spearheading this. Also turns out Michael Gove supports this as well.
The centre ground in British politics, if you're looking at it from a sort of objective perspective, has long since been passed. All of the mainstream political parties are now left-wing.
Yeah, but this is the Schmittian observation of liberalism. It tries to set things outside the boundaries of being political. It's like progress, this is an inevitability. The debate has already been had. Globalization is as inevitable as the changing of the seasons, as Blair said in the Tory party Freudian slip, Labour Party conference. And so they have put this beyond debate. You're just antiquated if you're quibbling about the number of Africans that are coming over every year and taking up social housing. You're retrogressive. Why are you trying to stoke a divisive culture war? That's what they bring out all the time. So even though, they're far off in the distance of the left, they're claiming themselves to be centrist, to present themselves as neutral, so that none of these policies are up for debate anymore. Cates is realizing, actually, the British public don't like what we're doing here. We want to re-enter the debate and listen to the democratic mandate and enact policies that the Brits want, like lowering migration. And instead, she's getting, bonk, you're a Nazi. Now you can't talk about it. Now, the gag order, fortunately, hasn't worked, as I presaged. The genders guidance from schools came out the other day. The guidance, as rolled out by Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, who told Politics Home, or it might have been .co.uk, that children have a right to self-identify. So, yeah, don't trust her to put in great safeguarding measures. But the guidance that's been issued, and this isn't legally binding, by the way, this is just what teachers can do if they like. Teaching staff should go to parents straight away if a child wants to identify as the other sex. No punishment for using the wrong pronouns unless it's bullying. I'm sure that the "Miss, he's bullying me" won't be exploited and encouraged by online activists. Schools should keep and protect single-sex spaces like toilets and changing rooms, but you should use discretion and generally keep boys out of girls' sport. So if playing full-contact rugby, and there's a 16-year-old boy running at a girl, it's just fine. We can case-by-case basis with your fractured collarbone. Kate does point out, as Liz trusted as well, I haven't got a tweet up, that this requires a change in the law because these are children. Their physical safety is at risk. You shouldn't be lying to children. What kind of freak wants to do that? You should lose your job if you do so. So she's still going after the failures of government, but there are certain things that I suppose the gag order won't let her talk about in the Conservative Party, Dinage, Gove, and the like. Pretty happy that she can't. And the final way that they're trying to rig it against any future cases coming up through the midst, getting elected as part of a new wave of conservative populism, holding your tongue until the right time and then coming out and saying, aren't we not serving the country? Sunak and CCHQ have tried to consolidate the selection process to give Sunak ultimate veto power over any candidate so that no local conservative organisation can pick candidates. Instead, it's all done by central planning.
So you mean the unelected leader of the Conservative Party can now pick and choose who gets elected?
Yeah. Now, there are about 40 MPs that complain about this. This has currently been put on ice as of this morning. But it's so transparent they want to turn it into their own little fiefdom. And I would say Rishi Sunak's own little fiefdom. But
I imagine he's sat in number 10 just like, I love democracy.
Yeah, but I don't think it's Sunak. I genuinely think he's too dim-witted and too checked out. Again, he was a Goldman Sachs banker. He was going to bugger off to the US right before he got parachuted into a safe seat and kicked all the way from treasury to office of prime minister despite not being voted in by the membership. I think this is the bright blue and type cohort that are saying, no, we need to be the center ground, remember. We set the agenda of change here. We set the rate that we're going down. But I'm just going to read from this. More than 40 MPs, including Liz Truss, Suella Braverman, Sir John Hayes, and Jonathan Gullis, so New Conservatives and the like, that rebelled against the Rwanda plan. You're seeing a factionalism here. They wrote to Sunak to stop the attempt to impose a quote-unquote shortened selection process for prospective MPs. Earlier this year, the Telegraph revealed concerns among senior Tories that the Conservative headquarters, CCHQ, was attempting to stitch up safe seats in favour of blueprint candidates aligned with Mr. Sunak ahead of an election expected next year. Talk of CCHQ's alleged plans to impose by-election rules, allowing the party to impose shortlists on associations on a national scale, as soon as next month reignited those concerns. Conservative Party spokesman, they don't name him here, said it is standard practice for the party to speed up selection processes as soon as we get closer to a general election. Now, what's funny, when you compared Keir Starmer's tactics to marginalise the Corbynites earlier to this, the reason they gave is because the Labour Party have already done this for their candidates. So they're doing the exact same thing. They're trying to shore up the ideological hegemony within the Conservative Party ahead of the next election that just so happens to be looking like the Labour Party wearing blue. Shock. One of those behind the letter said, selecting candidates is the rightful preserve of a local party member, and any attempt to subvert that democratic process where the election could be as far as a year away would be an unjustifiable power grab by the centre. Forcing shortlists of these 3 hand-picked CCHQ favourites onto local associations at this stage would be an affront to members' democratic rights. We urge you to stop this and instead continue with the current selection process. If the shortened process is imposed in January, this would be a matter of huge concern to us and would damage the democratic process. Now, the selection process is already weighted in favour of whoever the internal party pick. Again, back to David Cameron saying we drew up women and ethnic minority shortlists to make us more diverse. But the Conservative Party are clearly trying to gatekeep out dissidents, effective dissidents like Kate's. And so, excuse me if I don't think that this investigation is all above board here. I think they're just trying to censor people that share our ideas, share the popular ideas of the British public. And the Conservative Party seem to be deserving of destruction. It's just a shame that the alternative that's going to inevitably win the election isn't any better.
If you enjoyed that segment from Podcast of the Lotus Eaters, why don't you check out my latest Broconomics on the return on investment of seeking a woman? Spoiler alert, it isn't good. Anyway, come and follow us on Twitter or at lotuseaters.com, which you really should do because, let's face it, it's an election year in the US coming up, so we won't be on YouTube that much longer. Follow us there.